Welcome back to Changing Latitudes. Well, I have to say it's a big success. The reservoir is full of water. It's currently 18 degrees out. It's a beautiful full sun day, and I thought it would be a great day to go through the facts. The facts of building this reservoir and getting it done was not as easy as it was originally thought to be, and I thought I would share all that out for you. But you can't say it isn't a success when the main goal was to make sure that we had water for the coming season, and we've done that. It's frozen about 4 to 6 inches thick right now. We've had some serious cold temperatures for the last couple days, but I have to say I'm very pleased with the outcome. Let me go ahead now and show you several opportunities that we came across along the way, how they work out, and things we're going to have to repair come the spring. Well, I'm down here on the northeast corner of the reservoir now, and I wanted to share with you a couple opportunities that came up along the way. You know, when you originally plan things out, you think through them, you figure that'll work and that'll make that happen, what have you. In this particular scenario, we did face a couple questions. One, we came across a problem along the way, if you remember from the other videos, where we were actually seeing springs bounce through the side of the reservoir. Well, what turned out to be a situation that we had to fix led to another problem in the design. The original design was only to have an outflow, ability to turn on a valve outside the reservoir and empty out all the water. But unfortunately, we came across the springs after we had buried that line. So I used the same outflow line for the French drain that we were going to use underneath the liner to get the water out. Now that was a success. However, it led to a redesign or a modification on the inside here for the dump out line. We had to put the valve inside the reservoir. Not a problem, because I would only be dumping it out with maybe a foot to a foot and a half of water. Anything more, I would just leave it in there, to be honest with you. So what happened was we had an early freeze this year, and the water came into the holes of the dump out line that I had put down the middle and froze within it. When the water came in, the ice lifted, snapped that line right off at the elbow. So we had to rush to get it fixed. We had all the water dumped out, which of course I was a little eager to get the water in, so it was actually pretty dirty water. And we dumped all that water out and had to go down and do a repair. And I'll link a video up here on the top, or at least I'll show you the video up in the top left corner of what we had coming in, as well as what was the fix at the end. So needless to say, that created this problem. And if you look out there, right there in the distance, it's a nice little red valve handle that's currently floating in the reservoir. Not a good thing, but ultimately we'll get that fixed in the spring, or should I say later in the fall. Second thing that we had done in all of our rush to get this done, again, we were fighting weather, we were fighting the rock, we're fighting several elements along the way. We unfortunately took the southeast corner either down a little bit or it settled. And as a result, we weren't able to capture all the water that was available to us. So we again will fix that in the spring. Good news is it only appears to be in the southeast corner. So we'll get that fixed. And if you remember correctly, that was the corner that had the most lift that we had to put into play to get that dam to work. So that is a second repair that we will do in the spring. Let's take you down and show you how that water's flowing out of the French drain. You can probably hear it better than you can see it. But the water's coming out of the French drain. These are from the springs that we discovered along the way. The good news is we caught a major problem. This has actually been running the entire time. Now, I do fear and I have a bit of concern that we might have some water maybe finding its way out of the reservoir, whether it be through the two valves or even in the well that we put in the connection there. So we might have a surprise for ourselves in the summertime when the water may be going down a little bit faster than just evaporation. Let's take a walk now over to the other side of the reservoir and discuss some numbers. Before we get on to some numbers, I thought I would stop and take a look at this corner here where the water has come in. It's all frozen solid at the moment, but when the water was pouring out of the reservoir, when I say pouring, leaking somewhat, I noticed there was quite a water in our canal. Again, we have a solution for that. We'll come back and we'll fix that up just nice. But in the meantime, anybody for a skate? Before I get into the facts, I'm sitting in the canal right now that leads to our reservoir with the gate in front of me. A couple challenges in this space to be certain. The only reason for those challenges was frankly we had to rush. We had to rush to get it in. We had a ton of weather coming. So what we've learned is that this reservoir, oddly, with a consistent flow from the creek over a course of a couple of weeks, really doesn't need to be this wide. So we're going to shrink that up come the spring. Instead of being 4 feet wide, we're going to make it 2 feet wide so that it can flow naturally without a lot of width and a lot of wasted rocks and other energies. We're going to have to put a bridge across this someday. So as a result, that'll make that bridge that much simpler. Another thing we came across was this gate right here. Very simple from the get-go, I've always said that. But what are the challenges with it? Well, it might leak, if you will, water into the reservoir. Again, not a problem really long term, as we will have a spillway. This year we didn't have one, so we were very anxious about that. So if a couple gallons per minute or a gallon per minute runs its way down to the other end and into the spillway, not a big deal. Other than that, I think it's been a fantastic success for our goals to be met. With all the water behind us, we'll be able to hit to our season. Well, let's get into some fun facts about how much did this thing cost. Now, as always with construction projects, what's the rule? Double the time and double the expense of the forecast. Well, I think we basically hit both of those goals. Not really wanting there to be there, but nonetheless we got there. And the key 100% driver of that was the rock that we ran into, that basalt. That basalt took out 3 days worth of work, maybe even 4, and required additional equipment charges along the way. So time, money, all went in the same direction. So what did we come across? And let me pull out a little cheat sheet here, so I can't remember all the numbers. So the original plan, the total cost of this project was somewhere around $35,000. I allowed myself to get up to 40 in my mind. So I needed to plan accordingly. I figured it would take about 2 to 3 weeks, maybe with some extension into the spring. So what did we come across? Equipment rental alone was $10,900. The additional labor cost added into the total cost of $10,800. We had some additional equipment that we had to put to work, which was another $3,000. Electrical, which is the full price of the whole project worth of electrical, which is not completed, is $2,800. The pipes in and out of the reservoir and feeding into the irrigation system is somewhere around $2,000. All that 4-inch PVC really adds up. The well, if you recall, we put in that nice green well. Something that didn't have to happen, and something that might even be a challenge from one of you all out there, is why didn't you just throw the pump right over the edge? I didn't want to do that. I didn't want it in the seasons, and I didn't want it in the weather, that line just hanging out there. Keep in mind, this is the front of our property, so we're looking for that to not look a particular way, or should I say look a particular way. So I wanted to make sure that well was built and construction right. So it was $2,000 for that. Transportation of dirt. Remember, our friends, our neighbors helped us out tremendously with lots of loads of dirt. Somewhere around 100 truckloads showed up on the property. Now those 100 truckloads were some portion of which I had to pay to move it in, and some portion I was just lucky the truck was going by. So that cost somewhere around $4,500 if you combine the movement of it and then the placing of it around the reservoir area. The liner itself cost about $7,400. Remember, the reservoir is 255 by 55 by 7. So that's a pretty big liner. It was all shipped here from Arizona. Nicely done, great operation, it worked out really good. And then last, some landscape material that we had put down before we to line the bottom of the creek and to line this canal for $350. Total of $43,700. And so before you say that's pretty close to that $40,000 number that you were anticipating, keep in mind I have to come back in the spring and put the final touches on that. That is a foot more of dirt all the way around, and also landscape it all out, get it all straightened out, and then run those lines up to our pump station and what have you. So there's a lot more energy to go into this, to be certain. Also, I plan on lining this entire project here with all rock. So got to put rock cost into that, rock cost into the creek. And the reason why we do that is because when the water starts rushing out of here, it really tears down the level of the dirt in the creek. So to be safe, so that it doesn't impact our reservoir someday, we're going to line that so that the water runs over the top of it and just goes out the other end as it's designed to do. So long story short, I am anticipating another $30,000 to $35,000 to be spent in the back half of this coming year. A lot of money to be certain, but as a side note, if I would have drilled my well down further and possibly got to more water, it could have cost me an additional $40,000 to $50,000. Just recently had a friend, in fact it was Ron who did the work on the property, just put that kind of investment to work to get his well to produce the level of water he was looking for. Also too, if I would have put a second well in, I would have maybe possibly got to water 4 or 5, maybe even 10 gallons in a different location than our current. But by the time I paid for all that to be moved around, I'd probably still be looking at another $50,000 to $60,000 to get that working and up and running. It's both cheaper than what I currently have behind me. Of course, this is natural, and we may even build a second reservoir to backfill and support this one downstream. So long story short, I know it's expensive, and I know the project overall is something that you kind of take on as a challenge. We've met the challenge. The water's in, the season's up, we're ready to go for next year. So before I part, I'd like to leave you with this. Please subscribe to the channel. Put a lot of work into it so far. Frankly, it's been more joy than work, but love to have your subscription and join us for the rest of the challenges and opportunities and revitalization that we are going to do this property over the next several years to come.